Here's Jeff Paterson, our Canucks reporter, the host of RinkWide Vancouver, which is counting down to the end of the year. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, fellas.
That's a really good attitude right there. Those first two words, I'm proud of you, Jeff. That's good after the day that was yesterday.
Jeff,
we have to find our joy any way we can these days, and it generally isn't in the 2.5 hours between puck drop and final buzzer.
Only 4 more left. You get your 82 badge again, and then we're off into the off season, which can't come soon enough. Speaking of, Jeff, I'd like your 2 cents on what all the various reports we've heard this week about the Canucks off front office and coaching staff. Let's start with the notion of running it back. Rutherford, Alvin, Foote, whole lock, stock, and barrel.
No, I'm getting a kick out of all of the reporting, both locally and nationally, that basically has reached the conclusion that everything is on the table and open for discussion. As it should be, although these final 4 games cannot have any impact on the decision makers' conclusions of what they've witnessed over the last 6 months here. So I'd have to think that somewhere somebody does have a pretty good sense of how this is all going to shake down. The idea of running it back to me just seems completely foolish. And I've long said on your show that people have to pay a price. There has to be consequence. I've taught my kids through 20 years decisions and consequences, and this management group that had a 50-win, 109-point season not that long ago has completely driven this hockey club into the ground now, and obviously forced the trade of Quinn Hughes. You can't. Somebody has to step up and take accountability. And I do think that it's going to have to cost some people jobs. So when I hear this idea that, oh no, one option is running it all back and thinking that next year it's going to be different, like I can sit here and in my head hear these explanations whenever we get the chance to question management about this dark season. We'll hear about injuries. We'll hear about the optimism of a healthy Thatcher Demko and what he might mean for this hockey club moving forward, and the fact that Marco Rossi's here now, and that gives them a 1-2 punch at center that they didn't have for most of this season. And I just want to pull my eyeballs out even thinking about that, but have been around this job long enough and kind of know how this goes. And I think that's exactly how it would all play out. Improvement from within, all the experience that all these young players have gained this year playing in the National Hockey League, significant minutes. And yeah, down the road, those guys will be better for it. But next year, I'm not so sure. And certainly after nights like last night, the performance in Los Angeles, it just feels like they have all checked out now.
I'll do you one better or one worse than running it back. Jeff, how about the notion of reassigning Patrick Alvin within the organization so we're not paying him for nothing?
Yeah, and I've heard that floated. You just don't see it in pro sports. So I would be shocked if that's the way it all went down. And yet, when I think about Patrick Alvin, the person that I've come to know a little bit through his time here, I think the least favorite part of his job is the public-facing stuff. If ever there was a guy that probably could accept a reassignment / demotion that allowed him to work to his strengths and more on the scouting and player development side of things, that's probably where he is best suited. He had an opportunity here. It hasn't gone particularly well, but he's Jim Rutherford's guy. Jim brought him in, and I could see Jim Rutherford trying to protect him rather than having to, flat out fire him. The other part is, it's my understanding that Patrick Alvin's wife has a fairly high-level job here in town, and, if he wants to stick around and have this as a home base for the family, then maybe there is a world in which that works. It's been such a bizarre season for the Vancouver Canucks that nothing really would surprise me at this stage, but I haven't closed that off as an option if it's the way it all shakes down.
It's a wonderful place to live. We know how Swedes have felt about this
happy
community.
Wife, happy life.
Absolutely.
And I'll say this too, guys. Like, if there's a priority from my standpoint, whether you want to frame it as a gun to the head, only one decision can be made, or just in terms of the most urgent, like the rebuild is happening, like against everybody's thoughts of whether or not they would actually jump in with both feet. They've actually done enough from a managerial standpoint that it looks like they actually mean to rebuild. So in that way, I think the off-ice stuff, we can agree, is headed, for the most part, in the right direction. But on the ice, that's the one thing that we can still evaluate on a night-to-night basis, Jeff. The coaching, the decision-making of Adam Foote perplexes me and makes me seriously doubt that he is a National Hockey League coach. And so for me, that's the bigger question going forward rather than the managers. Again, just priorities, never mind whether or not it all should happen.
And look, we have all covered this team through the last decade. There have been lots of bad years. This has been different, being dead last, sinking like a stone to the finish line with 10 losses in the last 11 games. This idea that we're not seeing much in the way of player development, certainly on the back end. There are a few examples up front, perhaps, but these are the things that you're judging this coaching staff. It's not about wins and losses. They're up against it almost every night. They're going to lose way more than they win. We know all of that. What is this coaching staff? And it's not just Adam Foote. I'm lumping the staff in here as well. These guys are on the ice. They're doing the video work on a daily basis. Are we seeing progress from Tom Willander and Zeev Buium and DPD and Victor Mancini? And, those last two, they can't even get in the lineup on a last place team on a nightly basis here. So, yeah, and the other part there is trying to sell this to a fan base. I mean, we're hearing on a daily basis now, long-time, diehard Canuck fans that are starting to step up and speak with their wallet and peel away from this hockey club as far as their, all-in commitment is concerned. And I just think the idea of selling this coaching staff to this fan base, even when they're at this low ebb, this whole season has been screaming for change. And so that's why I come back to this idea that there's just no way that they can run this back and seriously look their season ticket holders and their best customers in the eye and think that, yes, that's the best course of action for this hockey club.
How about Ryan Johnson? You've known Ryan Johnson a long time. It's been 14 years now in the Canucks executive offices in various roles. And, of course, we knew him for a couple of seasons here as a player as well. What's your 2 cents on Ryan Johnson, whether or not he should be elevated, promoted to general manager, and whether you think that would resonate with fans?
I just don't know. And honestly, that's not a cop-out. It is that you don't know until you know. I mean, people thought that Jim Benning, with this great scouting background, was ready and the right man for the job. That didn't go so well. People thought Patrick Allvin had worked to a position where he was primed to get a first opportunity as a general manager. And there have been some moments, but here we are. With this team that basically has spiraled out of control this season. So you're right. I've always enjoyed my dealings with Ryan Johnson. I think he presents well-spoken guy. Communication's been a massive issue for both of the last general managers that were employed by the Vancouver Canucks. So I think Ryan Johnson would acquit himself nicely there. But in terms of him having both hands on the wheel, you just don't know until these guys are in that chair and starting to make these decisions. And so I did a nice job overseeing Abbotsford. Obviously has a championship to show for it. It's been a difficult year. And I really do. I feel sorry for everybody associated with Abbotsford. I mean, most of their best talent has been in the National Hockey League all season, to the point that Ryan Johnson has been left scrambling on a number of occasions to find anybody that can serve as a backup goaltender. They've been playing with 8 and 9 defensemen on a lot of nights. Like, they just haven't had a legitimate roster to work with down there, mostly because of what's happened above them at the National Hockey League level. So talk about a guy that's paid his dues without a doubt. And I support the notion, but I just can't sit here and tell you that Ryan Johnson is the answer for the Vancouver Canucks. But I do think that he has earned the opportunity, and certainly his loyalty to this organization probably should be rewarded. So let's see where this one goes.
Is there is there any thought that maybe the Vancouver Canucks need to fully divest themselves of this group, turn the page, and just begin with guys that are going to be here for the next 10 years? They get the longest leash.
Well, that gets you to a Ryan Johnson conclusion, I would say. Right?
If you think he's got enough experience to be the architect
in that
of
model.
That.
Yeah, exactly.
But, do you need a 10-year plan starting today? And, of course, that's not with Jim Rutherford. It can't be. Just the age comes into play there.
Maybe that is what it takes as a guarantee for anybody that's coming in that they are going to get an extended runway. But when the buck stops with ownership and patience is in such short supply there, and that's the other part that we haven't heard from ownership. And so anecdotally, we're told that ownership's on board with this and has finally come to this realization that what they've been doing for the last decade hasn't been working. And so maybe it was time for a new path, but still would love some sort of indication, whether in the form of a letter or I'd love a press conference and to hear from Francesco Aquilini himself, but I'm not holding my breath for that one. So it's hard to kind of connect those dots and think that now management would be on board with something like, yes, we are fully prepared to ride this out with you over a 10-year period. And, just back to what you said a little bit earlier, Blake, like you're right, they have signaled that they are in it for the rebuild. But we still haven't seen a lot of activity from this front office outside of some trades. But even at that, there wasn't creativity, not taking on bad contracts, so weaponizing cap space, all those types of things that the truly effective rebuilds have done. And so it just sort of feels piecemeal here, and come back to this idea that the development of players is already an issue. There isn't a whole lot in the pipeline. And Ryan Johnson can get the promotion, but he of all people would know that there isn't a whole lot in the pipeline here. And so maybe he would demand that sort of assurance from ownership, because he would know that the cavalry's not on the way, certainly not within the organization right now. They've loaded up on these draft picks. That will help, but they've got to hammer these draft picks and make sure that they get almost all of them right. I'm going to give them a little leeway. You never hit on 100% of your draft picks, but they've stockpiled the picks. Now they have to use them as effectively as possible.
What about Manny? Jeff, where are you on Manny? Do you think Manny would resonate with the fan base?
Yeah, with the fan base, absolutely. I think fan base is certainly on side with Manny Malhotra, but it's an undeniable truth that he would be another first-time head coach at the National Hockey League level. Again, a guy that has paid his dues and has worked not only in Vancouver, but Toronto. He understands the rigors and demands that come along with a job in a Canadian market. He's a level-headed guy. Again, I think articulates his message and his thought process fairly well. And so that would serve him well in that role here. So, again, it's been a really difficult year for him, but there's no doubt that he attracted attention last year. And I mean this with all due respect to Manny, that last year was maybe too much too soon, in that he won the championship. And it's almost like teams around the National Hockey League maybe weren't ready to jump in and give him that opportunity to make the jump to the National Hockey League level last summer. And they kind of wanted to see him back it up. And then we know that this season has gone off the rails. But I don't think really that that's Manny's fault. And I don't think Manny has lessened as a coach. In fact, he's probably learned some pretty good lessons through the adversity that he has faced out in Abbey this year.
Meanwhile, on the ice, if we might for a second, or what's actually not going to... Well, it's actually not what's happening on the ice. Okay. It doesn't look like the Vancouver Canucks are going to get any more college free agents, none of the prime ones. We've chronicled some of the exploits down for the Abbey Canuck guys that got there, but the big names aren't coming. It doesn't sound like, Jeff. Is that a disappointment that those are long shots anyway. As much as TJ Hughes is getting hyped, like there's no guarantee that he's a player, but should they have made themselves a bigger player in those sweepstakes?
Well, my hunch is that they probably kicked tires and were in on some of them, but look where they are right now. Although sometimes, that's appealing to a college free agent because it's an automatic opportunity. And that is the one thing that the Vancouver Canucks could offer. Although jumping on board this disaster right now, I don't know how appealing that would be to anybody and their advisors. So, yeah, it's disappointing just because I think it reflects another loss for the Vancouver Canucks when other teams are adding pieces. And as you said, they are lottery picks, and a lot of them don't pan out, but there's no acquisition cost, and sometimes you do find a player that can come in and contribute. So, I had hopes that as this season slipped away for the Vancouver Canucks, that was something to look forward to. We knew that there weren't going to be many call-ups from Abbotsford, but I did think that somehow, some way, they might be able to add a couple of college guys. Now, they did at the American Hockey League level, but in terms of anybody that might grow with this group and be a part of what they're trying to put together, looks like that opportunity has passed. So, yeah, I mean, small D, but I would call that a little bit of a disappointment. Just again, you wanted to see this team find the odd victory because it's not happening on the ice. So away from the rink, I thought it was an opportunity for them, but it looks like an opportunity now that has passed.
And practice rink.
It's moving forward.
Well,
a little bit of money committed by the city, it sounds like, earlier this week by the park board. It looks like plans are slowly churning forward.
Yeah.
Are you a believer when you see it person right now, Jeff, or are you fully confident it's going to happen?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a whole lot to add based on the story that Daily Hive had about the park board, but we'll get the first update, I would imagine, from Jim Rutherford whenever he meets the media here at season's end. It's become sort of a twice annual question, and the training camp availability, and then again at season's end. And there really hasn't been much to report on the file, but it does feel like some progress. And the hockey club hasn't said anything. It refused to comment when IRF had the report about a month ago, and kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit. But we will hear from Jim Rutherford in his own words. They haven't made any sort of proclamation. There hasn't been any ground breaking, shovel in the earth, scissors and the ribbon cutting and all that kind of stuff. So your guess is as good as mine. It feels like it's moving in that direction, and that part is good news. But I also think that now I'm seeing a lot of pushback of, one sheet, that's it. Like, does that really
solve the issue? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Right.
And there was a speaker yesterday talking about if it's only one sheet and the Canucks need it even for an hour a day, like the capacity loss for the community. As you talked about when this story first broke, Jeff, like if it's one sheet, that is not really a practice. That falls short of what you need.
Yeah, I mean, it allows them to say, hey, we've got a practice facility, but do you really? You would have all of the ancillary parts of a practice facility with training rooms and medical and all of that, and a player lounge, and that's great. But you're right. Like, the teams that are doing this upright have multiple sheets of ice. A lot of them have 3 sheets. Certainly most practice facilities at the NHL level have at least 2 sheets of ice. And, when you have multiple sheets of ice, it allows you to have practice. You can split your practice if you wanted to. You could have groups working on different things on different areas of the ice. You could have your injured guys skating while the main group is practicing. Usually visiting teams, when they come to town, they want ice as well, and you can offer them ice at your practice facility. Well, again, this is just going to complicate that. If visiting teams want afternoon ice, because the Canucks would generally practice in the morning, now you're into competing with community groups and public skating and minor hockey and all that kind of stuff. And so you're right. It's not a perfect solution by any stretch of the imagination. And ultimately, we'll see if those are hurdles that can be cleared when they finally get around to
training camp.
This.
You need multiple sheets for a training camp.
Training camp. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, the AHL group could do Britannia. The NHL group could do.
For sure. But that's not ideal.
You can still take your training camp to Penticton, right?
Yes. Well, you should. I mean, okay, one last question for you, Jeff. It's a toughie. Can you believe they lost Clay?
No. Honestly, I can't. They have broken Clay, and this is it's a sad story because
it's a community
nobody loves his Canucks. It is, and not just Clay, but his ticket partner as well. So it's a. But we're seeing more and more of these stories anecdotally, but Clay absolutely represents a next level of fandom that has seen enough and has finally spoken up, and good on him. And, as they played out the string here, and we've talked about attendance and ticket prices and people getting in and all that kind of stuff. But the inventory for this year has been sold. Like, the people that are getting tickets on the secondary market, those tickets have been purchased generally as part of a season ticket package. Push comes to shove here over the offseason now. And how many can they retain? And how many people are truly willing to buck up and pay for this product after what they've seen? And we've heard that season ticket members don't feel that they're getting a ton of bang for their buck. Forget the games and the 8 home ice wins. That letter to the season ticket members that really was the Canucks saying, look at all the things that we've done for you. outside of the Gals, and people have pushed back on that and don't feel that necessarily they're getting the value add there. So, yeah, I was surprised. I thought Clay was a ride or die guy, but I totally get it. It's a big investment, even if it's not full season tickets. It's still a ton of investment financially, with your time, your emotions, and people have just kind of said enough is enough with this season. And ultimately, we'll see what that looks like in the building on a lot of nights next year.
And the non-corporate fan, his partner, Clay's partner in the season tickets, said it's too hard for us now to sell our tickets if we can't go. And so unless you're a law firm, that's a big consideration. It used to be that you could make some money back even.
Yeah, corporations can always find or almost always find someone to go, or they just eat it. But if it's individual people buying them, yes, there has to be a way out of the games that you cannot attend or don't choose to attend, with some notion that you can break even on that night.
Well, at least that you're dealing in the free market. But now that they have said that you can't deal in the free market to sell those spare tickets, you've got to go through X, Y, and Z process, and we get a piece of that process. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Free market. Does it matter if it's a free market when there's no market?
That's true, too.
Well, and to that point, like I've got a longtime friend whose family has been season ticket holders since day one. And this is probably a month ago, coming out of the Olympic break, a day of game. He's got 2 seats, lower bowl club seats right in behind the penalty boxes. And he sent a text to a bunch of us. I'm just part of a group text. And he was like, hey, anybody want to go to the game tonight? Just crickets. And, that's kind of where we are in all of this, that it's just not worth the effort to get up off your own couch to get downtown. For 3 or 4 hours of ultimately what you're not seeing much, and you're not getting any kind of return on your investment of time.
Well, maybe they'll see the light and decide, you know what, it's worth $2 billion right now, perhaps before we have to fund a practice facility and other things, escalating salary cap, that it is time to move on.
Well,
Jeff,
I am curious, just really, like when we saw what was coming out of Seattle this week, and this idea that the Kraken have failed their market.
Yep.
You see that around the National Hockey League. I think that applies some pressure on whoever sits at that dais a week from now. I really am curious to see if there is accountability on that front, because for the most part, even that letter that went out to season ticket members, there was no sort of tone to that letter of, we're with you in this, we feel your pain. It was just, hey, look at all the things that we've done for you as season ticket members. Now buck up again. So I am really kind of curious to see if there is true accountability and ownership, not of the hockey club, but of this season that has completely gone sideways.
That's a great point, Jeff, because therein lies the rub here. This franchise is so transactional. It looks at it, you're here, we're there. There's no in this together. There's no community with their best customers. It is purely a transactional relationship. Yep. That's how they regard their season ticket members. And seemingly day by day, that's more and more how the season ticket member is regarding the organization, right? Like back in the heyday, like we used to hear from season ticket members who almost felt like an ownership of the club. It was almost like a European soccer-like attitude towards the Vancouver Canucks, that the club was part of the community, part of their fabric. And that is just so lost right now. And it's particularly lost because you don't ever hear from ownership or the senior business management either, right? Like at least back in the day, the likes of Chris Zimmerman, Victor DeBonis, even Jeff Stipek, briefly, were making the rounds. They were out there as public figures in Vancouver. Michael Doyle is not. Like
we had DeBonis on 3 times a year.
That's right. Like, Victor DeBonis, they would call us up at the old radio station. Hey, we're doing this, this, and this. Would you mind having Victor DeBonis on as a guest? And Victor would come on and he would explain whatever business initiatives were going on with the club. Because they value that sort of communication with the community that they just don't seem value. They don't even execute any kind of communication with the greater community these days. It's really, really sad.
So the worse they get on the ice, the more distant that upper management and ownership gets. And that's a massive disconnect. And yet they continue to preach this notion of they've got it, they know best. And I think it's pretty clear now that they don't got it and they don't know best. And so, to bring the conversation sort of full circle here, something has to change. Something's got to give. This idea of just returning everybody and thinking it's going to be different next year, it is a foolish notion. There's just no doubt about that.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I would add Rutherford, Alvin, Foote, and Doyle. I think you got to blow them all out. I think you need a total fresh start here, and I think you've got to be humble and understand just how disastrous this was, just how much you have failed as an organization, and basically go cap in hand and say, look, we've got new people here. Give them a chance with a clean sheet and fresh start. Jeff, you enjoy that game tomorrow against San Jose. At least you get to see Macklin celebrating. Too bad it doesn't look like a playoff.
2 games this weekend, Matt. There's 2 games this weekend.
You know what? It's sort of like eating medication, though. Better to take 2 quickly, and rather than spread them out. Just swallow it, move on.
By Monday morning, we will be rid of half the games remaining on the schedule.
That's the reframe. That's the
attitude, Jeff.
Thanks, buddy.